Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Shloka, and thank you so much, Anna, for having me here today. Thank you, Anna, for running a tight ship and keeping it as clean as possible, at least the feed. As Anna said, we're going to go ahead and record this. So I want to introduce myself, but the topic of this talk is about kind of my decade in statistics and data science, which for some of you might sound like a really long time, and for some of you might sound like it's not that long. So the question that I've got for folks, and I'm going to put it here in the chat. If you feel comfortable answering, feel free to do so. But would you describe yourself as maybe early career? Would you describe yourself as mid-career? Would you say late career? Or would you say maybe post or after career? It's helpful for me to be able to get a sense of who I'm chatting with today. I've got the presentation geared toward hopefully everybody, but it might skew a little bit more toward early and mid-career folks. But if everybody is late and post-career, then I want to take that into account. So cool. This is this is helpful. Please feel free to keep those rolling in. What I'm going to do while you have those rolling is I'm also going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so hopefully you're all able to see my screen. What we're going to chat about today, Shloka had asked me for a title, and so I wanted to come up with something punchy. So I've got politics, product, and peanut butter, a decade in statistics and data science. I had a job in politics, I had a job in peanut butter. My current job is working on the product team within an organization, and wanted to share a little bit about my career trajectory and hopefully make some recommendations, especially for those of you who would describe yourselves as early and mid-career. But hopefully there's also nuggets of wisdom for those of you who might be late in your career or even post-career, as you think about hiring people, working with people, understanding motivations of people who are earlier on in their careers. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Matt Brems. I use he, him pronouns. I'm usually based in Baltimore, Maryland, though I'm calling in from Florida today. My full-time job is I'm a senior manager of data science product and strategy with a company called DataRobot. I'll get more into what that means later when I get to, kind of as I navigate through my career. I also founded a company called Beta Vector, so I get to give myself whatever title I want at the company I founded. So I settled on, or my co-founder and I settled on, managing partner and principal data scientist. It's a bit of a side hustle that we've built in and had a few employees at this point. I maintain an affiliation with General Assembly, the coding bootcamp that I'll talk about in a bit. And I also volunteer with Statistics Without Borders. I work closely with Shloka. I work with Anna. I work with other people on this call like David and Gary as our vice chair here at Statistics Without Borders. And this is sort of my default screen that I show at the beginning. I'm not going to go through my background because we're actually going to go through my background sort of in reverse order in a moment. So in terms of things that you should expect today, what I want to share with you are, how did I get to where I am today? What jobs have I had and what was I doing at these different jobs? What skills I had and when did I get those skills? What were some of the roadblocks that I overcame? It's very easy when we talk about career. You might see it's almost kind of like I'm putting my resume on display here, and resumes tend to show the best things. But I also want to be candid with folks here about some of the things that weren't perfect. And then some additional recommendations that I have, whether it's for you or your interactions with early and mid-career folks that may be helpful, especially given that statistics and data science are these rapidly evolving and growing and changing fields. We've got data engineering, we've got software development and software engineering that are adjacent. It's helpful for us to understand like what this means and how people are navigating their careers now, which is likely very different than what people did, even 20 years ago. I want to also start off with a caveat. This is my journey of a decade in statistics and data science. What has been right for me so far and what has been wrong for me so far may not be what is right for you or what is wrong for you. I encourage you to use this info as it's helpful to you, but your journey is your journey. What I share here is in no way trying to say this is the one way of going about things. I yet I'm hopeful that some of what I share here is going to be helpful to you all today. So candidly, how did I get to where I am today? And this is roughly in order from most helpful to least helpful. One, there's been a lot of luck. Related to luck, you might call this a form of luck. There's been a lot of really good timing as well. I would be remiss if I didn't call out the role that bias played in this. Looking at the diverse faces here on this call, the diverse names, the diverse locations, I recognize that a lot of people in data and in tech look a lot like me. We've got a lot of white people who are hiring managers in tech. We've got a lot of men. We've got a lot of cisgender white men who are hiring, and that's important to call out for a lot of reasons. I think we want to acknowledge that women, people of color, women of color, transgender folks have, in many cases, a lot of additional roadblocks to overcome. And so I want to call out that bias has been. I think that bias is bad. And I also want to acknowledge that it has been something that has probably helped me throughout my career. And I feel confident in saying it has definitely helped me throughout my career because I just think that that's important to acknowledge. I've also had a lot of help from other people, and that includes a safety net. I have been able to take risks, and I've been able to pick jobs that have sometimes had much lower compensation because there was a safety net that was supporting me. I could focus on other things like learning opportunities or investments. And that's something that not everybody has. And then finally here, there is hard work, there is perseverance, there is all of that. And if we think about this, this is the item that's most obviously within one's own control. With that said, even though that's within one's own control, it can be, we might think, well, if there are all of these other things that are out of my control, it can be really dispiriting to try and, get a job in this field or try and move into a new job or a new role in this field. But I do want to call out a couple of other places in this list where you do have items in your control that I think are also helpful to call out. So with respect to a lot of good timing, the more you say yes, the more chances you get to have good timing. I'm sure that I could make a binomial distribution comment here. If you've got, if your probability of, some event being good, you use P to represent that. And if you increase N, your sample size, the number of times you make those attempts, the likelier it is that you'll get one success or two successes or more successes. I recognize that and I think many of us recognize the binomial distribution may not be a great distribution for modeling that. That probability of success is definitely going to vary. These trials are not independent of one another. We don't have a total number of trials that we're going to work toward. So I think most, if not all of those binomial assumptions are violated. And yet I still stand by the fact that the more that you say yes, the more chances that you get to have good timing. A couple of quick examples of that. At Ohio State, a professor fell ill. I was working for her class, and there was a group of 10 of us who were working for her class, and she ran a 1,000 person class. And she fell ill for a period of 2 months, and they needed somebody to step up and be the interim course coordinator to just run that 1,000 person class. I had every reason to say no. I was a grad student. I was not a particularly strong grad student. I probably should have spent more time on my studies and things like that. And yet I still made the decision to volunteer for that and raise my hand. And I think that helped me to develop certain skills, that helped me to certainly add more to my resume, but flex some muscles, dip my toe into management, focus on organizational skills and things like that. I volunteered to manage at my first company, Optimus Consulting. I was working for a political consulting firm, and we needed somebody to hire and bring on interns and fellows. And I just raised my hand to do that. When I taught with General Assembly, they needed folks to be on and run the product advisory board. And so I did that. Even here within Statistics Without Borders, I worked under David Whitford, who is the director of engagement. And he shared with us on an engagement team meeting once that he was going to be out of the office for a few weeks. He and his wife were going to go on vacation. And he said, I need somebody to join the executive board meeting in my stead. And I raised my hand for that. And on that executive board meeting, the executive board or the executive committee was talking about some of their needs, and one of their biggest needs was marketing and communications. The person running marketing and communications, who is now Shloka, had stepped down. There was kind of a vacuum where we needed to fill that void. And I'm by no means a Twitter expert or LinkedIn expert, but I've spent plenty of time on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so I just raised my hand for that. And that afforded me that opportunity to move over into being the director of marketing and communications, kind of surprisingly. So in terms of a lot of good timing, it is just happenstance that I was where I was when David said he needed somebody to fill in for him. And yet my willingness to kind of raise my hand there helped with that. And then the other thing that I want to call out here is a lot of help from other people. Whether you want to talk about it in terms of karma or what goes around comes around, or any sort of, whether it's religious or spiritual or whatever, if you help other people, if you put that goodness out there, I believe that does get paid back to you. And related to that, the more reliable you are when you work with others, the likelier they are to help you. So I do think that there's a little bit of control in that, that we as individuals have. It's not just waiting for somebody to offer us, support or a hand. And in some cases that comes in the form of asking, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So as I get into my jobs, I'm also going to pull up the chat here because I want to be able to see questions and things that people are sharing. So I will do my best to keep an eye on the chat as we go through things. So with that, my first job, so to speak, was when I was at Ohio State. I started out, I was earning my master's degree in statistics, and I was a graduate teaching associate. I'm not going to go into what being a TA is. I imagine many people on this call have been a TA or have worked with a TA or know what a teaching associate is. But I also, in this case, kind of volunteered to be on the graduate recruitment committee in the Council of Grad Students. One of the things that people have often asked is especially early and mid-career folks, is like, what skills do I need to have in order to get this job? Not this one specifically being a graduate TA, but like, what skills do I need in order to go out for this job? And, so people might say, I want to study Python, or I want to study SQL before applying to a specific job. And that can be helpful. So I wanted to just share, like, what are some skills for most of these jobs? What are some skills I had coming into the job? And then what are some skills that I developed in this particular role? So with this, some of the skills that I had before here coming into grad school and being a grad teaching associate, I was an undergrad math major. I studied math, econ, and I minored in political science. I had very basic R programming experience. I had done a lot of public speaking. I did debate in middle school and mock trial in high school and Model UN in college. And, I had been a TA for a course in undergrad. So I had some practice with public speaking. I had some experience writing in a technical way. I had to write a thesis for the econ department when I was in undergrad. But I think the biggest skill that I sort of brought into this was a willingness to just say yes, a willingness to raise my hand and say, yes, I want to do this thing. Some of the skills that I learned or honed while I was at Ohio State, I learned a ton of statistics, given that I was a graduate student in the stats department. I learned a significant amount of R while I was there. A lot of it was self-teaching, but I still learned a lot of that. Public speaking, and in particular, including answering technical questions for non-technical folks. Being a TA, it was hard to try and articulate to people what's the difference between standard deviation and standard error. Moreover, why should people care about that? I seem to always draw this short straw. I taught 8 a.m. most of my time at Ohio State. And when you're working with, candidly, a bunch of hungover college students at 8 a.m., generally what's on their mind is not, what is this crucial distinction between standard deviation and standard error? Or how do I grasp the concept of a p-value? But that's still really important. And so as Anna shared here, and as you'll kind of see as a theme throughout this, being able to answer those technical questions in relatable or in ways that non-technical folks can understand is really important. And I also picked up here that I liked survey sampling and design, and that helped me in my first post-grad school job. When I worked for the political consulting firm, I really, really drilled into that as an area of focus. And I learned in grad school that that's something that I liked. Moving on to my next job here. I worked for Smuckers, like the jelly. I was an intern in between my first and my second year of grad school. I was an enterprise analytics intern. And it was a really, really cool opportunity to work with them. There were two big projects that I got to run and a small project that I got to run. One of the projects was in clustering, which I had never seen before. I knew of like the kind of, I don't even want to say the theoretical idea, but the idea of clustering made sense, but I'd never like done it. I did not know the differences between agglomerative and divisive clustering or k-means clustering, and why these different things, why they matter. It is also where I learned that randomness is in a lot of machine learning algorithms, which kind of blew my mind when I didn't know about that in advance. So coming into Smuckers, I had statistics, public speaking, and R experience. Some skills that I learned, or some things that I learned while I was at Smuckers. First is interviews aren't necessarily jobs. What I mean by that is the questions that I was asked during the interview centered around like the different types of t-tests and experimental design. And nowhere in my job do I think I ever ran a t-test or designed any sort of experiment. That's not a bad thing necessarily. I get that the interviewers wanted to be able to assess my statistical knowledge and background and understanding. And yet it was very interesting to be interviewed for a job and then go in and have that job just be wildly different from what was asked of me in this interview that assessed whether or not I would be good. I also learned that starting with a company, having that fresh slate means that you have to prove yourself from scratch. You can't just be like, oh, well, I'm a good student, or, oh, well, I passed the interview. It's like, okay, then that's when things kind of started. I learned clustering. I learned about what SQL was. I don't think I could write much SQL, maybe even any SQL when I finished my internship at Smuckers, but I learned about like what it was and a little bit about what databases were. And I bolded this, I learned what good company culture is like. I'm still close with some of the interns from Smucker from that year. I think they did a really, really good job of helping to build culture and get us to work together with one another. My manager was very supportive, and it was helpful to see like, what is good company culture like? And I like what David calls out here. Matt talks about saying yes. This is related to being audacious. No one is going to sing your song better than you. Yeah, it in some cases can be an unfortunate fact, but it's true. It's that we have to be able to kind of promote ourselves, because we're going to be the best people to promote ourselves. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in like an Instagram influencer sort of way, but it can be like we in many cases want to be able to say, yes, I can do this thing, pick me for this. So moving on to the next topic here. So I graduated from Ohio State. In my first job, I moved to the Baltimore, DC area, and I worked for a company called Optimus Consulting. I started as a data science fellow, and after 6 months, they transitioned me to a junior data scientist role. This was a political consulting firm. I worked in politics through the 2016 election. And this is where I got to take my survey sampling skills and put them to use. I really managed this survey to model pipeline, which was drafting surveys and working with campaigns to build out surveys and quality check them, then kind of send them out. We did a lot of phone surveys. I'm confident that you've gotten phone surveys at some point. You likely reject the calls. Under kind of my domain or whatever, we sent out 55 million surveys during the year and a half that I was there. It was an election year, so there's a lot of polling going on. We got that data back, and I would use that data to build models predicting who's likely to show up to the election or who cares about what issue. And I would share those findings with these political campaigns. I also got to design experiments for a presidential campaign. And again, as I talked about earlier, raising my hand, I managed 2 people. So I brought in certain skills here: statistics, public speaking, R, and what good company culture is like. Some of the skills that I learned on the job at Optimus were machine learning. I had learned about like linear and logistic regression in grad school, but didn't get into things like decision trees and random forests and support vector machines or anything like that. I also learned about SQL basically from scratch. I had very, very lightly dabbled at Smuckers, but I got to learn about that there. Again, the reason that I think that this is important is that, especially as people are, early in their career, there can be this focus on, here's all the skills that I need to put in my toolkit before starting this job. And more, I do think that there's an element of truth to that. I think that there are a lot of companies that say, hey, we do need people to have, years of SQL experience or something like that. But I also think that there's a lot of on-the-job training and a lot of on-the-job development that people do. I also learned a little bit about to hire and manage. By no means am I going to say that I'm an excellent manager. I certainly was not an excellent manager while I was there, but I got to start practicing that and exercising that muscle. Management is something that you kind of don't get good at until you do it. And people are usually bad at the start and then get better over time. I also learned about how much companies care about employees, and related to that, what I was willing to tolerate. So in that job, it was a political firm. It was during an election cycle, and we worked extremely long hours. I was also commuting from Baltimore into Washington, D.C. every day for work. So it was about an hour and a half each way, that commute. I remember pretty vividly, there was a week when things were so busy that I worked 100 hours or over 100 hours. Most weeks it was closer to I'd say 70 hours, but it was still a lot of work, and very candidly, not for much money. It wasn't like we were bringing home, I wasn't bringing home $60,000 a year right out of grad school to work 70 hours a week. It was significantly less than that. And so I quickly learned how companies in many cases, certainly not all companies, but companies in many cases will say, hey, you are not we're going to get out of you what we can get out of you. I also emphasize this here, and this goes back to what Anna had talked about earlier, that technical communication to non-technical people. I was working with politicians, and I was working with people with political backgrounds, people who, might have been, non-technical majors. It's been decades since they were in a stats class, if they ever even took a stats class. So I had to figure out how to say, well, you're at 45%, this person is at 44%, but realistically, there's not a difference here. The political world, and I'm sure that this happens a lot elsewhere, people love to say directionally correct, to say, oh, well, our number is higher. So yeah, it might be within the margin of error, but our number is still higher. And it's hard to articulate to people that they should care that, or their interpretation of this is not accurate. And if they rely on it, it could lead to some bad things. So that I really got to continue exercising that technical communication muscle. Moved to General Assembly after the election. I started as a data science instructor, was lead global data science instructor when I left. I taught a full-time data science program, which was pretty cool. 1,000 students, and it was a 12-week program, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., trying to teach them how to do data science in 12 weeks, which is, it's a pretty tall order. You can't cover everything. It's like, how do you boil things down to 12 weeks? There were also other things that I was able to focus on, like trying to lead client-student partnerships. How could I get my students to work with real organizations and do real data science work? I helped to automate parts of my boss's job. We were very survey-oriented, and we got surveys, feedback every other week. And my boss would spend 6 hours a week, 3 hours a week, taking these surveys and just loading them up into Excel and copying and pasting across all of these different things. And I spent a Friday afternoon just writing a script to help automate that, to save my boss a few hours every single week. 3 hours a week it's not a game changer. It's not like that's something that's going to, that based on that alone, I, should get a promotion and a raise and everything like that. But it was there was a problem, and I was able to use some of the data science skills that I had to solve that problem. I also pitched in as what's called a sales engineer. And if that's something you're not familiar with, a sales engineer tends to be a very technical person who can help with the sale of a good or a service. So oftentimes you'll have generic salespeople, and I don't mean generic in a bad way, but you'll just have general account executives or salespeople whose job it is to sell things. But if you're selling a really technical product, like General Assembly, when they would work with companies, General Assembly would say, hey, we can sell a training program for your employees. Well, the salesperson is good at selling, but may not know all the ins and outs of data science, of statistics, of SQL, of R, of Python, understanding why Python might be better than R, or R might be better than Python, and things like that. So companies and organizations often bring in a sales engineer there to kind of be that technical expert. So you can see on the left the skills that I had before. The skills that I learned here, I learned Python basically from scratch in preparation for this job, and throughout my teaching process. Somebody said that I just had to stay like 1 week ahead of my students in terms of what we were teaching, and I was really a trial by fire there. In terms of communication, I learned about sales engineering to speak that language a bit. I also learned about teaching online. They shifted me to teaching online after about a year. So I spent 2 to 2.5 years teaching online. And teaching via Zoom is very, very different than having a whiteboard behind me and being able to look at people and point and ask questions and things like that. The Socratic method, which I really liked, didn't translate super well to that. Stephen. Stephen was one of my students at GA. Thank you, Stephen, for the kind words. I think I would encourage you to pick one big thing to iterate on. So we had these 12-week programs, and at the end of 12 weeks, we had like a week and a half or 2 weeks before we would start with the next cohort in most cases. And after one cohort ended, I'd be like, there were so many mistakes we made. This content wasn't as good as it could have been. We can update this code. We can add these projects. We can do all of these things. And I settled into this group of every cohort picking one new thing to iterate on, because trying to do all of these things and solve all of your problems is really quickly going to lead to burning out. But instead, picking one thing every 12 weeks to iterate on and make better just made things a whole lot more sustainable so that I could keep teaching for 3.5 years. I cannot emphasize this enough. One of the most important things that I learned at General Assembly was how much I care about working with people who are smart and kind. I have worked with organizations before and since General Assembly where everybody might be smart, but not everybody is kind. Or maybe everybody's kind, but they're like low performance is kind of tolerated. And that's I think that specific instance is certainly a trickier thing. You want to make sure that your organization is set up for success and we can help everybody. And at the same time, I think working at an organization where people are smart and kind is one of the like 3 biggest things I look for moving forward, because oh, would you mind muting? Oh, thank you. Because it's really just so important. I don't mind or I don't care to work with a bunch of really smart people if they're not kind, and that to me is just like is a deal breaker from now, probably forever, assuming that my conditions and everything stay the same. Also, again, revisiting that topic of saying yes and being organized. There's a lot of different things going on. And when we are educated in math or in economics or in statistics or in data science, we focus so much on the technical aspect of things. And so many of the things that matter in the real world are being kind, delivering on something you say you're going to deliver on, being able to organize things in a way, communicating. I cannot overstate the importance of communication. And so I think that being organized is one of the things, and there were a lot of systems that I kind of developed for myself while I was there, because I used to be really bad at organizing. Now I'm just kind of bad at being organized. So I've gotten better at that, and I think that really helped me at General Assembly and since then. So before getting into Beta Vector, I see Shloka has asked, we'd love to hear how you organize your work and life, and anybody feel free to ask questions. Any tools that have worked for you. So I've iterated on a bunch of different tools kind of throughout my life. What I do is every day now I have literally just a spiral notebook, and I write down the night before what my to-do list is going to be. I write my to-do list in black. I've got a red pen that I go through and I cross things out once they're done. And I try to roughly organize it in terms of like things that I have to do for work, things that I have to do for Statistics Without Borders, and maybe some other things that like for other organizations that I might be working with. And then at the bottom, it's like honestly, it's kind of like my New Year's resolution. So this year, one of the things I want to do is I want to read 25,000 pages, which might just be really, really aggressive and not possible, but we'll see. But I have to read like 70 pages a day in order to do that. So I write down at the bottom, 70 pages. And so putting all of that on a to-do list and having that, like writing that down the night before, has been very, very helpful to me, because it helps me to go to bed with like a more serene mind, helps decrease any sort of anxiety or anything like that. And I can be like, okay, I'm done with things. That's, I slide it under my bed or put it away out of sight. And then now I wake up the next day and it's like, okay, I've already got a plan for the things that I want to do. Anna shared that Notion works for her side hustle, and also uses a paper notebook. Ooh, the Eisenhower matrix for prioritization can be really helpful. The Eisenhower matrix is a 2x2 matrix. On one axis, you've got how important something is. And on the other axis, you've got how urgent something is. And then you've got basically 4 quadrants that you can define. You can define things that are urgent and important. And it's like, those are the things you need to do. It's urgent, it's got to get done now. And it's important. It is important for me to do this thing. Things that are urgent but not important, you can decide what you want to do with those, maybe delegate those to somebody else. Things that are important but not urgent, you can maybe put on the back burner and say, I'm going to carve out this time to work on that thing. And things that are not urgent and things that are not important, you can just be like, nope, I like give myself permission to not do that thing. And that's also been something really helpful, is just ruthlessly saying like, okay, no, I have to make a decision. I cannot do everything like this. It is not urgent. It is not important. I will not be doing this. See, Tech has shared digital Kanban board for everything I do. Is Trello an example of a Kanban board? I forget if it is. I've used Trello before in the past with some mixed results. Beta Vector, founded my own company with my friend. It's a side hustle. So calling it a company, it is a company, it is an LLC. We are incorporated in the United States, and yet it's something that I do on the side, because while I was still working at General Assembly, I thought I've got a little bit more energy, a little bit more time now that I've gotten good at my job. I want to put that energy elsewhere. So some of the skills that I learned here is how hard it is to run your own company, even if it is just a side hustle. There's a lot of business development that goes into it. It's not like people generally just reach out and say, hey, I want to hire you to do something. You kind of have to, you have to put the hustle inside hustle and get people to give you contracts. The ups and downs of working with your friend is really important. So I co-founded this company with my friend, and it has not been a seamless experience. I would say that on the whole, it has been a positive experience, and it can just be really challenging. We're both pretty type A people. And when you've got 2 type A people with different motivations and ideas and all of that, that can just be challenging, even if you think you're really, really, really close friends. And for context, I got married last year. This was a friend of mine who, his girlfriend did a reading at our wedding, and I invited him to, and he attended my bachelor party. So it was like, he's a very close friend. And even then, even though we were very close, there's still some of those challenges. The cost of burning bridges is important to call out. If you say you can do a contract and then you ultimately can't do it, I regretfully have had to do that. It's problematic, and it can be really, really taxing in a whole lot of different ways. And then finally, your time is worth more than you think it is. I was really astonished at how much people are willing to compensate for statistics and data science related work. It was very, very eye-opening. So that is Beta Vector, the side hustle. I'll quickly go through these. You'll notice that I'm just now focusing on skills I learned here. To focus on that, you hopefully have a good sense of some of the skills I brought into each of these. I accepted a contract role with FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. It's a private corporation that kind of acts like a self-regulating body for the financial industry. I was a senior data scientist with them doing research on bias and fairness in machine learning. I learned Scala. I learned various machine learning techniques that focus on estimating bias and fairness and the degree to which, your model might be skewed toward or away from a certain group of people, written communication skills, what type of people and managers I want to work with. This kind of goes back to I want to work with people who are smart and kind. That helped me to understand what's the type of person and what's the type of manager I want to be. And when I say person, part of that is in just like a general social sense, but also even if I'm not a manager, how would I want to interact with you? How do I want to be as a teammate, as a friend, as a colleague? And I think that has been really instructive. And then the first bullet point here, probably should have bolded it. If you dislike a job and if you have the ability to do so, which I recognize is conditional on all sorts of privilege and everything like that, quit. It is my belief that, again, conditional on you having the ability to pay bills and you've got a support system and all of that, that no job is worth your mental health. No job is worth just dreading, the work that you might do day in, day out. And so I ended up terminating that contract a little bit early with them. There's a note in the chat. Yes, as Shloka said, quitting a job or a situation that's toxic is very, very empowering, and realizing that you can do that. And hey, I believe that I'm worth more, or that I deserve more, I can earn more, and not necessarily in a compensation sense. Sure, salary and dollars matter, or whatever unit of currency you may use, but it goes beyond that, saying, hey, I expect to be treated in a certain way, or something like that. I expect to not have to work nights and weekends and all of that. Being able to decide what you want for yourself is wonderful. And I think that kind of related to that, I'll share a story that I saw on Twitter a while ago. I forget the person who shared this, but there was a woman on Twitter, a Black woman on Twitter, who had shared that she had just accepted an offer. It was an eye-popping amount of money. I want to say it was like $325,000 a year, which blows my mind. And that's amazing. That is incredible. And a lot of the responses were like, well, you don't deserve that. You're not good enough for that. Who are you to ask for that sort of money? And, haters are going to hate. And she responded she posted another tweet later saying, like, who are you to say what I do or don't deserve? She's like, I knew that I deserved that. And that's what I set my sights on. I wanted a job that checked all of these boxes for me, including compensation. And she's like, I'm not saying that every company in the world has to offer that to me. There just has to be one job, one company that's willing to offer me one job that checks all of these boxes. And I'm willing to be patient until I can find that one job. And I thought that was really insightful. It's like, yes, we just, again, if you've got the ability to be patient, and that's conditional on all sorts of things, but who is somebody else to say you don't deserve that, or that's not the right move for you? You get to decide that for you. And so again, to Shloka's point, quitting a job that is toxic can be very empowering. I also briefly worked for a little over half a year for Roboflow, which is a computer vision startup. I was employee number 5, and I very quickly learned, do I like working in a 5-person startup? The answer to that was no. I was hired to be a generalist. I was growth manager there, which kind of falls outside the statistics and data science side of things. But the product was about computer vision, so it was still very technical. I was hired to be a generalist, which is a broad way of saying I wore many hats, even more than people generally do have in a startup. And my job wasn't very well defined. There wasn't a specific set of responsibilities where it said, okay, you come in at 9 a.m. and these are the things you do. So I sold, I marketed, I built out an onboarding program for new hires to help non-technical people like salespeople get up to speed on computer vision and modeling and machine learning quickly. I wrote a playbook on inclusive hiring that included best diversity, equity, and inclusion practices for how do we make sure that we don't just hire people who look like the people who are already in the room. So I learned a lot of marketing. I learned a lot of sales. Like, I didn't know much about search engine optimization. I had no idea what a sales funnel was, or what a champion was, or a decision maker in the context of a sale. Again, the ups and downs of working with your friend came into play here. That same friend who I co-founded Beta Vector with hired me. He's the CEO of Roboflow. He hired me here. And this helped me to really also drill into what are the types of people and what are the types of managers I want to work with. And that can be a complicated situation. I'll quickly talk about my current job. So I started in August of this year with DataRobot. I'm our senior manager of data science product and strategy. I work on our time series team. We have an automated machine learning tool, and I specifically work on the time series and the forecasting product. And my goal is to help us scale this, to help us build a better product, to help us scale our sales and all of that. And really, I'm working with our product team, our engineering team, our marketing team, our sales team, our GTM, our go-to-market teams, and I'm sort of our resident time series expert. And there's certain goals to maximize ARR, or annual recurring revenue. It's a sales term. Minimize churn, so how many people like buy our product and then say after a year, okay, I'm not going to rebuy this product, or I'm not going to re-up on our license. So we want to be able to minimize that. We also want to minimize time to value for our customers. So from the moment someone opens up their computer, logs into the DataRobot platform, how long does it take for them to be able to get to some sort of value that they have, whether it's building a model, whether it's generating predictions, however they define it. Basically, my whole job is communicating. I just work with a bunch of different groups of people, and I take these very, very technical, deep time series forecasting features, and I have to be able to explain them to all sorts of other people in a way that they can understand. I also take the feedback that customers and the marketing team and everybody shares with me, and I say, okay, how do I work with the product and the engineering team to turn that back into these technical things that our engineers can build. So I very much am just a conduit for information, whether it's in writing, via presentation, oral communication. I, again, have learned what sort of people and what sort of managers I want to work with, how to be direct about what I want in a job when applying here. I kind of took all of the learnings from my old jobs and I said, okay, these are the things that I need. I want to be onboarded. I want to have specific definitions about these things. I want, X, Y, and Z, and was very clear about that. And also identifying the root causes of problems. I like to think of myself as a problem solver here. And really, there are all sorts of problems that I can fix, but drilling into what is the actual root cause of the problem that we want to be able to solve. So that has been my decade in statistics and data science so far. A couple of quick roadblocks that I want to share, because again, so far, like up to this point, it largely sounds positive. I've hinted at some of the negative components of it, like I had a manager who may not have been that great. But I also want to share what are some of those roadblocks. Let's not think of this just as a resume and everything's perfect. So in grad school, I started out as a PhD student. You'll notice that I shared that I earned a master's in statistics from Ohio State. I failed the first qualifying exam at Ohio State, and I was given an opportunity to retake it. And I thought I had moved to Akron, Ohio, was driving to Orrville, Ohio to work at Smucker's. And the grad advisor was like, nope, like you need to quit your internship and come home and study all summer so that you can stay in the PhD program. And I opted to not do that. And I remember at that time, it being this really just, I don't want to call it traumatic because I don't think it was traumatic, but it was a huge blow to my ego. I was like, well, I wanted to get a PhD, and this is one of the first things that I haven't been able to be successful at. Like, this sucks. This is bad. What does this say about me as a person? So I left with a master's degree. I applied for other PhD programs at other institutions, got rejected from all of those. I shared earlier that my time at FINRA ended earlier than expected. I quit FINRA due to a number of things way earlier than I expected, about 4 months in on my 6-month contract. I took and I know that we're pretty close on time, so I'll wrap up quickly here. I took a pretty significant pay cut to go to Roboflow, and my time at Roboflow ended earlier than expected. In this case, it was not my choice. I was actually let go. That's fairly common at startups, and yet it's hard to not see that as like a direct indictment of of my value as a person, what I can contribute to an organization, and all of that. And that, of course, in and of itself is like a really challenging thing to go through. And so there's a lot of instances in which like there's these different roadblocks that are in your way, and it's tough. It's like it's hard to not connect your value to some of those things. And I would just strongly discourage you from doing those. This is not nearly the set of roadblocks that some of you have overcome. Again, re-upping that comment about bias earlier, the way that I look, the way that I speak, I recognize that I have a great amount of privilege that is unearned. But I also think it's important to at least share that not everything has been, perfect throughout the slides that I've shared with you here. So a couple of quick recommendations for you. One, communication is so important. Practice communicating as much as you can. Teach if you can. Answer questions from other people if you can. Write blog posts if you can. I shamelessly linked to, I wrote a blog post about principal component analysis that if you Google principal component analysis, it at least used to be on the front page of Google. I'm pretty proud of that. It's called a one-stop shop to principal component analysis. That was pretty cool to be able to write that, because PCA is kind of important in the statistics world. If you've got a partner or a friend who's non-technical, practice explaining complicated concepts to them. Practice trying to explain what PCA is or what a random forest is to them, to try and get better at that skill. Ask people to review your resume. Do that repeatedly if you can. Be polite, give them time to review your resume. Be sure to thank them afterward. I've probably had over 20 people review my resume throughout my career, probably more than that. That might be an underestimate. But I've put a lot of time in that, and I think that can be really important. Compensation by itself is not happiness. Compensation can help. I don't think that money is a dirty thing to talk about. We've often been taught that, and I don't think that's the case. I think that money equates to freedom in a lot of ways. When I was let go from Roboflow, I had the ability to take 4 months off and look for the job that I specifically wanted, because I had been well compensated before and had that sort of safety net. That said, compensation alone is not happiness. FINRA was a very high paying job, and yet I was like, nope, this is not where I want to be. Going back to what I was saying really early on, say yes to what you can. There are all sorts of reasons to say no to things, and very valid reasons. Too much going on at home with family, taking care of parents, taking care of children, taking care of friends, wanting to have good work-life boundaries. There's all sorts of reasons to say no, and a lot of those are really valid. And I would encourage you to say yes to what you can. Again, going back to that binomial example, even though we know that the binomial distributions assumptions are all invalid here, the more attempts to put yourself out there, the higher your chances of having having that good timing moment. Your path is your path. My path here is not what your path is. And use 6 questions to help find a job for you. So I've got, I think, 10 questions or 11 questions that are on here, but I would focus on the big ones. So ask yourself, what are the things that I love doing? What are the things at which I'm exceptional? What are the things that I hate doing? What are the things at which I am bad? What are things that when I do them, I feel energized, I gain energy? What are things that when I do them, I feel depleted, I feel run down, I feel burnt out? And some of those sub questions that I have there can help you to better understand, what are those things you love doing? So what are your favorite things you've done in the last 3 months? When have you felt that you could do something over and over and over again and just be happy with it? And I think this can be really helpful for you to be able to understand, independent of the pressures of the world, independent of saying, I should do these things because this is the logical next step. Instead, it's, what are the things that make you happy, that give you energy? What are the things that you're really good at? And how do you focus on those? And how do you try to stay away from the things that you don't like doing, that you're not as good at, and that drain your energy? So I would encourage you to keep those in mind. Again, this is my journey of a decade in data science and in statistics. What's right for me and what's wrong for me is not necessarily what's right or wrong for you. Use any information here that's helpful, but your journey ultimately is your journey. So with all of that, I've got contact information here, so feel free to reach out, whether it's on LinkedIn or whether it's via email. I know that we are coming up on the top of the hour, so I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to toss it back to Anna and Shloka for their thoughts.
Thank you so much, Matt. This was amazing. And I have to say, I've been working with Matt for the last year and a half, and I did not know many of these things. So thank you for just being so honest, candid. We're getting a lot of comments, talking about things that work, but also talking about the things that were probably, not ideal, or probably not ideal at that time. Those things are so important. Thank you again, Matt, for just like going, your honesty and your candidness and taking us through your journey so far. Thank you to all of you for joining. Anna, thank you to you. Anna is a networking coordinator. We will have more of these sessions every month. Again, please connect with us. I've put a few links in the chat. Anna has graciously offered her email. Matt has his email as well. We really want to build a community here at SWB. We have amazing volunteers with amazing expertise. And also let us know, if you want to give a session like Matt did today, that's amazing. If you have any other skill or knowledge you want to share, that's also amazing. Anything, if you just want to say hi, that's also amazing. If we have 3 minutes, if somebody wants to unmute, ask questions, that's great.
Abraham has asked a question, and I'm happy to answer that. And folks can feel free to share their questions here. So Abraham asked, how do you start a writing blog? I've always had it in to do for over 3 years. That's a good question. I like Medium as a blogging platform because it's easy to get set up. And I think that's one of the big hurdles in getting set up. I would also encourage you to look up James Clear. He's got an email list that goes out about habits. He will try to sell you some stuff, so feel free to ignore that. And I have not bought anything from him, but he's got like 11 lessons on how to build habits, just like exercising certain muscles to build a habit. And if you want to be the type of person who has a writing habit, then I think he would be a good resource. There's also David Perell. He has a 50-day writing course. Perell. Zoom auto-corrected. David Perell has a 50 days to writing course that I also think that can be helpful around breaking it out into more tangible pieces. So I think that those two email newsletters might be helpful in getting you started on that writing journey. And then medium.com historically has been a platform that I've been happy with.
Amazing. If there are, thank you again so much, Matt. Thank you, Anna, for being here. Thank you to all of you for joining in from all parts of the world. Really enjoyed your session, Matt. It was really amazing. Please reach out. You have our emails as well as SWB email, as well as our social media. We would love to hear from you. If you have any ideas of future events, if you want to present. Oh, I think Krunal has an example. Any ways for adjusting mindset between the different roles? That's a good question.
Yes. So there is a book that I read recently that I thought was very good. It's called The First 90 Days. There might be a free version online. I'm not certain, but I found it to be a really valuable book. So I started on a product team very recently, and that's a very different set of skills from what I've needed to exercise in the past. I mean, communication is always important, but there's other things that are challenging to exercise. And so I would encourage you to check out that book and see if it's something worthwhile. It's basically saying when you get promoted or when you move to a new company, the set of skills that you used in the past are not necessarily that set of skills that you need to exercise. If you've been a senior data scientist and you're very, very good at your data science or your statistics, and you get promoted to manager, being a manager is just so different. And that book gives you a roadmap for saying, hey, in your first 3 months, here are ways that you can change your mindset, that you can tangibly take steps to get started and accelerate as quickly as possible in the first 3 months of your new job.
Thank you so much. Please reach out if you have any questions, if you just want to say hi. And it was amazing to be here, share this virtual space with all of you. And I hope you have a great evening, morning, wherever you are, you have a great day. And we hope to see you next month. So we'll, of course, send out that communication as well. It's most likely going to be a Wednesday around the same time. And we hope that this works for as many time zones as possible. So thank you again. It's really amazing to see your faces, see your names, and to connect with you.
All right. Thank you.